Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I have an amazing talent who's an expert on talents. I know that's very meta, but Bernie Layton is managing director of Stanton Chase. Now, if you're not familiar with Stanton Chase, they are one of the premier retained executive search firms in the world, one of the top. They've got dozens of offices, hundreds of people, tens of millions of revenue. This is a real player in the executive search space. Their average compensation of the people that they're typically engaging and placing is $400,000. So we're talking about very senior executives, the kind of game changers that are going to make or break your organization. And I invited Bernie to the show today to really help us understand how the sausage is made. A lot of people ask me, a lot of my listeners ask me, how does executive search really work? What does it really look like from the hiring side? And so Bernie's an expert. He's been in the business for over 30 years, most recently heading up the industrial practice. He's done somewhere between 700 and 1,000 searches, if you can imagine, CEOs, partners, VPs, you name it. So Bernie, I'm thrilled to have you on the show today.
Pleasure to be here, Jeff. Thank you very much.
I'm really excited. Let's start with just something really engaging. What is the single biggest misconception and myth about executive search? Just the things that people get wrong about headhunting.
Well, I think the most obvious one is that the candidates feel that they are represented equally with our clients. I think at the end of the day, the candidates need to appreciate that we are representing companies looking to fill key strategic pivot moments in their business executives. And so at times we struggle with that a little bit, trying to do what we call candidate care effectively.
Yep, I do. I have the same in my practice where candidates, many just don't understand that we are not career coaches. We're engaged by a company to find a very specific profile.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that profile. So you've worked with hundreds, maybe how many searches do you think you've done? If you had to guess.
Over 800 concluded.
800. So you've seen this movie 800 times. When you develop the spec or the profile, what is it we're going after? Who are we trying to find? What are some of the mistakes that you see your client, the CEO, maybe the board of directors make in developing that spec?
Yeah, so the spec is the key for creating a marketing piece to the position. Our view is that it not only profiles the company and talks it up in an assertive enough way that it attracts interest for folks that didn't necessarily know they were looking. The second outcome is portraying the position and the needs of that role in a manner that's not just clinical duties and responsibilities and required skills, but gives some flair and energy to it. And then we always import or incorporate a challenge section. We are looking for this type of person, and they really need to have this sort of passion or energy or the soft EQ, IQ skill sets that are frequently needed. And we put those in there so that the candidates actually can self-select out where appropriate. So
they understand that this is not me. I don't want to waste anyone's time.
You got it. Yeah, we are in the business of time efficiency for our clients.
Got it. When clients, I'm sure you've heard it all by this point, and clients say, I want this purple squirrel, I want this, person with 3 hands, 11 fingers. What criteria or specs do clients tell you that you actually disagree with, that you actually have found in 30 years of doing this to not be very useful or predictive of a candidate's success?
Well, yeah, I'll go real counterculture here and say that I think, first of all, a pedigree in terms of education or prior firms that they've been with and a sort of the glossy resume, in many cases, not the most appropriate person given our client base, who tend to be mid-caps and need entrepreneurism and roll up the sleeves and so on.
So the person that went to Harvard Business School, worked at GE, then Google, is not necessarily the person that the client should be hiring?
Yes, that's correct. Although I like that pivot from GE to Google.
Yeah, that's unusual. I just made that up.
Yeah, right. But the truth is, when companies get too enamored with the safe hire,
Yeah.
not the best hire,
Yeah.
tends to be the real problem.
And what's the disconnect there? What they think it's safe. I assume your premise is it's not really as safe as they think. For the listener, what is the issue?
Well, I think it's a courage moment on the part of the clients. And do they have the courage to understand that they are hiring for the need of the business and their team and their culture, or are they hiring to meet the needs of a board of directors? In many of these cases, the CEOs are under some pressure.
Yep.
And so a direct hire into the CEO in many cases is a response to concerns by their constituents, which is either shareholders or the board of directors or both.
Got it. And it would seem like a safe bet to find the resume of a person that's just, worked at academy companies, went to great top 5, 10 schools, but the reality is they may not be the best person for the role.
Exactly right. And the other is hiring for certain functional areas outside of their industry. There is an implicit warm blanket around executives wanting to hire people they know or from firms that they directly compete with. And there's many an occasion, particularly in IT and finance and human resources, where hiring more of a thought leader outside of their industry might be a better play.
Because what? Because they'll bring fresh ideas or something else?
No, I think it's the fresh ideas, it's new processes, it's creative thinking, it's the ability to challenge the status quo. In most cases, searches are conducted instead of an internal promotion because the firm is pivoting. It is making a change of direction required by the dynamics of their industry or their board or whatever.
Right.
So they need new and different. And that's a big passion of ours, is to talk to companies about why today, why this role, and what do you need new and different that you haven't found in the past.
Presumably you'd already have it internally. You wouldn't be doing the search. You would have promoted someone internally if you thought you just needed more of the same.
Correct. Precisely. And so, and sometimes there are skill gaps. And so we appreciate that they want to hire direct out of industry if there are just skill gaps. They don't have an effective succession. But succession is getting more and more capable, so I don't think that's really the issue.
Got it. Tell us what's going on in terms of making the sausage. How has the internet changed it over the 30 years you've been doing this? So when you first started, it was smiling and dialing, Rolodex. There was no LinkedIn. Now we're in 2019. What is harder and what is easier in recruiting?
Well, the speed of play is up 10,000%. We just to transact a conversation between a candidate and a client in the old days was a 2-week process. Now it could be 10 minutes. So that's the most obvious thing.
Yep.
I think that it's a devil you know versus the devil you don't. There is a heavy reliance upon data resources that exist out there to cull and pursue research and data to then commence the search. But the truth is, we are in certain ways puzzle makers. And so we have to put parts together that may not be the obvious. And so I find the internet helps us with speed and process, but it also can inhibit us in terms of relying on it too much.
Is LinkedIn invaluable or overestimated or underutilized?
I think it's a starting point. It is that we've done a survey or analysis, I should say, around the concluded hires.
Yep.
And less than half conclude from someone we sourced as a contact point out of LinkedIn. It gets us started. It gets us into certain networks that we're potentially not as strong at. Yep. But ultimately, more than half of the hires don't come from that data.
Got it. So just to give the listener some context then, what would you guess the funnel looks like for a typical search? I know it varies by role, but how many people start at the top of the funnel? In other words, how many names do you look at? How many frogs do you kiss? How many do you really interview in detail to get to that one hire at the end?
Yeah, brilliant. That's the question. So we try and target 200 at the top of the funnel, 150 to 200 depending upon the particulars of the role. The outcome is then down to 30 or 40 that need serious consideration by us. then that leads to 8 to 10 or 15 prospects who have some degree of interest in the role, where we're testing motivations and really getting into the details of their backgrounds. We'll present 5+ on a given search with fully vetted background checks and on, the whole thorough vetting. And generally, we'd like to see it have 2, ideally even 3 going into final consideration.
Yeah, so you have an heir and a spare in case the first choice says no.
You got it.
And I'm guessing the first choice says no a lot these days. They have infinite opportunities.
Yeah, that's the assessing issue. And there are a fair amount. I would say the folks that want to look but not change is actually down. The folks that want to actually consider a change, fully vetted, are up. Our turn down rate is very, very low, but then we just don't let it get to that point.
Yeah, you've weeded those people out earlier in the funnel.
Challenge statements, right? Yeah, exactly.
Got it. I understand. Let's talk about something that inevitably comes up, especially if you're hiring in the industry, which is non-competes. So how do you address that? How do you find out whether the person has a non-compete? I've had issues where an individual magically has forgotten what they signed when they joined the company 10 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of magical forgetfulness that goes on in the candidate world. Yeah, we test for that very specifically. That's a challenge question that we put into the process pretty early on. We asked them to go review that. More and more interestingly, our clients want to, if we get down to a couple vetted finalists, they would like to look at the non-competes because they will make a risk decision about how much they're willing to defend that individual coming into the organization. We're finding more and more that the non-competes have glaring holes in them. This gets particularly true of not the CEO, but the L1s, as we call it, the level ones below. There's a lot of holes in an open room there, and it's amazing how often now. We just did a senior VP of product development, product management for a big industrial company, and they actually put the person on the bench for 90 days to get clear of their non-compete.
So they hired the person, paid the person, but said you can't come into the office.
Correct, for 90 days.
What would have happened if they couldn't get the non-compete resolved?
Ultimately, it was their determination in that.
I see.
That they just needed to sit for 90 days. That once they got past that, they were past the timeline.
Got it. I understand.
Right.
When you think about the legendary horror story that you tell at cocktail parties, without names mentioned, of course.
Right.
Can you share that story?
Oh, I've got a few of those. You always do. This is a great cocktail fodder. My favorite one is we're this is a number of years ago, but we're putting a CEO into a family-run mid-size business out in San Francisco.
Yep.
A technology company, and the families, the wives get together. Everybody is kumbaya. It's all looking very good, and it was the guy goes, "Okay, I'll be making the offer on Monday." He gets on a plane for the weekend, headed out. He ends up sitting next to somebody, and just by circumstance, he mentions the candidate's name, and the person sitting next to him goes, "Well, you can't hire that person." Like, well, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, he was convicted of actually killing his wife."
Oh my God!
Years ago, and so you can't, hire that person. And this is in an era. This was back before all the background and legal checks were as thorough as they are. And so, needless to say, I got a phone call on Monday that says, "Let's start the search over." And I'm like, "Well, wait a minute. It was all kumbaya on Friday," and he relayed the story. So there's always something. There's always interesting things. The ones that get me generically, and it's probably happened 8 or 9 times, is we hire in a new chief human resource officer into a company.
Yeah.
And a number of them indicated after they took the job that they had physical ailments or limitations on their ability to stay with the job. They were going to need 90 days off or 5 or 6 months off soon after they accepted the position.
Very strange.
Yeah. And you would think in that role particularly, those people would be sensitive to being in full disclosure mode. So
amazing.
Anyway, bunch of these stories.
I'm sure you've got dozens like that one.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you making the time, Bernie. How can people learn more about Stanton Chase or get in touch with you to better understand whether you might be able to find that person for them?
Yep, I appreciate it. And so Stanton Chase is, again, a global firm, 74 offices worldwide. StantonChase.com is our website. I run our Chicago office. We're right downtown. Feel free to reach us if that's appropriate to assist at 312-724-4000. And I appreciate the time and welcome any follow-up that's appropriate.
We appreciate you making the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff.